All right. Thank you everyone for coming to our 1.3 meeting. As you may have already seen on the remind, today we're going to be selecting, well, you're going to be selecting what officer positions you want to run for, if any. And then next meeting during IBC Social 1, which I'm going to talk about in another minute, you guys are kind of going to present. I'm going to walk you through how exactly that works, but we're not really going to have democratic officer elections. It's more so going to be based upon your performance. And we're going to give you all the materials you need to study, so on and so forth. But again, if you do pick like a curriculum officer position as an example, you're obviously going to need to know curriculum. So if you don't, that's going to be problematic, right? So this is the attendance form. Again, I don't scrutinize against anyone that doesn't come to a meeting. I just like to know who did, who didn't, so on and so forth. So just scan that if you can. And then current officers, if you can, just finish up the tasks if you haven't already. So uploading to the Google Classroom, finishing up some graphics, so on and so forth. Yeah, what's up? Don't worry, I'm about to walk you through that. I just wanted to let you guys know what it is we were going to head into. All right. So I'm going to walk you guys through officer positions once more, and then I'm going to let you guys decide whether or not you want to run for curriculum or graphic. You can't be both, and you can only select one officer position. In the case that nobody gets one of the XYZ officer positions, we may have a re-election for one of them, or we may just scratch that officer position for the next year. So walking through you from the top, these are the presidential positions, essentially. So you have two presidents of this club, or co-presidents. You have a curriculum president, or managing director, as we like to call it in investment banking, which is what we learned in 1.2, or a graphic managing director. And you can read through these bullet points on your, actually you haven't scanned that yet. Okay, so the curriculum managing director is gonna be the main lecturer. They're gonna organize meetings with investment bankers during IBC Social, which again is next week. I'll walk you guys through that in a second. You're gonna manage the Google Drive, which is pretty important. And then you're gonna obviously coordinate with all other curriculum officers. So make sure everything is in order, so on and so forth. Your graphic managing director, however, is gonna create posters and aid the graphic analyst, which is down over here, in the creation of certain graphics. And then we also have them coordinate with all other graphic officers. So funnily enough, being an officer last year was a lot more difficult because we were actually curating curriculum. If you're an officer now, you don't actually have to make anything. You just have to learn the stuff. So again, this is really great for you guys. Next, you have your vice presidents. And again, it's that co-vice president system because we have a curriculum side and a graphic side. On your curriculum side, you're going to record the YouTube videos and post them, and you're going to assist in lectures. Graphic, you're going to post on Instagram, and you're going to create Google Forms. And then for your associates, you have a curriculum associate who organizes what we're going to do during every IBC Social. And then they're also going to manage the Google Classroom. Again, because they're a curriculum officer, they're going to assist in lectures. Then you have your graphic associate, which creates the Instagram posts via Canva and assists graphic VPs. Now, if you're not really familiarized with Canva, that's okay, but just note that's what we use to create all graphics, not Photoshop or anything like that. It's also because we can collaborate together on Canva like it's a Google Doc. And then we have our graphic analyst lastly. That doesn't mean he's the least important. It just means, this is kind of your intern position, so on and so forth. So your curriculum analyst is just going to write chapter articles. So everyone knows that we have 5 chapters within this club. And in each chapter, we have 3 presentations. And 4 technically, if you include IBC Social. That's a meeting. So it's throughout that one chapter or the other chapter that you're going to write an article. That's like, 500 words? Just on something small that you learned. And we're going to post that on our website and, of course, give you credit. And then you're also going to assist in lectures, and you're going to assist all other curriculum officers in the case that they have some work that they need you to get done. And then your graphic analyst is going to do the same thing kind of with articles, but it's not with articles. It's just with graphics. You're going to make one graphic every single chapter, and then we're going to post it on our website in that section. And then you're going to obviously assist all other graphic officers. One thing I should also note is that the curriculum managing director is also going to manage the remind. It's nothing that crazy. You're going to send out a message every single meeting. And if you want to apply for a curriculum position, scan that. And if you want to apply for a graphic position, then just make sure to scan that. If you're not entirely sure right now, that's okay, because these are also on the link trees. Just one thing I do want you to note is if you can scan it, or I can just go directly to the links. Might be easier, actually. Let me do that. I'll just go to the one that's loaded up. So you'll notice that on that curriculum Google form, you have that same graphic we do have. So in the case that you want to recap on what things that we do, so on and so forth, you can check that out. Put your name, last name, number, and then not school email. So your personal email. You're going to select your position. You can only select one. And then you're going to write a 100 to 150 word speech that really details, well, I believe I put 3 things over here. Select the curriculum position you have, why you think you'd be a good fit. No, 2 things. So yeah, just about me, why I think this curriculum position would be a good fit for me and what I think I could bring to it. 100 to 150 words. Also, we want you to memorize it just because when you're teaching up here, you're not really going to have notes. There is a notes thing that you can do, and I'll talk to you guys about that when you do get elected. But again, we want to see how good your memory is or how much you care about presenting, right? And actually retaining certain amounts of information. So 100 to 150 words, you'll also notice there's no asterisks by it. So you can submit this form without putting it in here, and then you can type it up on a Google Doc and later edit your response and paste it back in. When you do that, just let me know so that I can go back over it, read it. Obviously, I'm not going to weed out through applications right over here. We're going to select what officer we want for that position when you do present this during IBC Social 1, when you do orate it during IBC Social 1, aka next week. And one other thing that curriculum officers are going to have to do, depending upon which one you do select, so like for example, let's say you want to run for curriculum MD, you're going to have a more difficult slide to study, and you're going to be presenting that slide during IBC Social 1. You might even have 2 slides, but if you pick like curriculum analyst, you're going to have a pretty easy slide to study and present. So 2 things that all curriculum officers are going to have to do. They're going to have to orate that speech, and then they're just going to have to present a slide of some sort, which can vary in difficulty depending upon what position you do select. And then I also have the directions right up over there. So in the case that you need a recap, you can read that. For graphic, it's very similar, except this time you're going to be making a graphic of some sort that just details a bit about why you, etc. I wrote it right over here so you can read that. Also, you're not going to have to memorize anything because as a graphic officer, I don't require you to present. So again, you can just read off of the slide. What I'm testing you for here is how well can you make a graphic using Canva. And again, you don't need to be a pro. You're going to learn a lot of things actually making graphics for this club. But I just want to see, relatively what can you do and how much effort are you going to put into it. And then you're just going to upload that graphic as a PNG. And you have those respective positions available for you as well. So again, I'm going to have the link tree up at the end of the presentation. If you have in mind what it is that you want to do, you can do that. Also, one thing to note, just like for the curriculum form, this isn't required. So you can go back and edit your response and then add the PNG in later. And you're going to present this during IBC Social 1 as well, so next week. And you will know what officer position you get by 2.1, so 2 weeks from now. After IBC Social 1, we start Chapter 2. We'll let you know what position you do have, and then you'll intern on under some of our officers. Sorry, I can't speak today, long day. All right, so we can start. And again, if you need access to the link tree, you can just go on our Instagram and you'll find it in our bio. We're going to talk a lot today about, well, how investment banks get paid, i.e., how those investment bankers may be getting paid as well, right? Their salary has to come from something. And how exactly, well, I mean, what exactly an investment bank needs in order to, an investment bank and banker will need in order to complete their respective tasks and functions. And this is going to dive deep into financial statements that exist that you're going to use in order to, well, bolster your analysis, especially when you need to give a decision to a company. Let's say when you're deciding whether or not this company should merge with another one, so on and so forth. So we're first going to talk about the payment of investment banks. So investment banks are first paid via commissions. So if you don't know what a commission is, it's right over here. When an investment bank charges a fee to conduct a financial transaction of some sort. And notice how we talked a bit about how investment banks can have a buy side portion and a sell side portion, right? So in this example right here, I talk a little bit about their buy side portion, where they're acting as a brokerage to, well, purchase a stock for a client. So a client is going to them for stock advice. That's usually something we're going to do on the buy side but no, it's happening right over here. But investment bankers at least are, or at least an investment bank is doing what it's usually renowned for doing, that being the middleman, acting as a brokerage, a facilitator. You don't need to worry about that example too much, though, because we're almost never going to talk about investment banks purchasing a stock acting as a buy-side institution. It's pretty rare. But again, that's what a commission is. Then we're going to have underwriting fees. This is really important. And we're going to talk about this in Chapter 2 in detail, what underwriting is. Does anyone know what underwriting is? I'm not surprised, honestly. It took me a while to grasp this as well. It just means to take on a financial risk for a fee. While that may sound simple, it does get a bit more complicated. I will draw it out for you when we get to Chapter 2 and we start talking about the initial public offering, I.E, when a private company goes public and you see their stocks on public exchanges. Well, stocks wouldn't exist on public exchanges if investment banks didn't help companies do their initial public offering, is another way to put it. So underwriting fees, taking a financial risk for a fee. So obviously these investment banks are taking on a financial risk of some sort and are charging a fee for that. It's when an investment bank generates fees by selling securities in the primary market. That dives a little bit deeper into what exactly underwriting is. Does anyone know what the primary market is, by the way? So there are two markets that we're going to talk about, the primary and the secondary market. You're also going to note that I'll use aftermarket with secondary market a lot, and I'll talk about aftermarket trading. So the primary market is where securities are sold for the first time. And to put it simply, you can't really buy securities or investments in the primary market. Only big institutions, rich corporations, etc. buy in the primary market. The secondary market is where you come in. Whenever you guys buy and sell stocks on the New York Stock Exchange, etc., via your brokerage, you're buying and selling on the aftermarket or on the secondary market. So those are just two markets for you to note. And we're going to dive deeper into what exactly that means in Chapter 2 again. So don't concern yourself too much with it now, but just note that it does exist, right? And you call that investment banker connecting them, again, acting as a middleman, the underwriter. So trading income, this is also what we're going to talk about in Chapter 2. I believe it's the latter half of Chapter 2, where we talk about, trading and the difference between trading and investing, especially for investment banks. And this is when an investment bank buys and sells securities, taking advantages of their mispricings. That's kind of like trading in general. But we then go to asset management fees. So asset management, someone comes to you and they're like, hey, what should I invest in? Or can you help me manage my investments of some sort? That's asset management in a nutshell. And this is also kind of a buy-side function. So we're not really going to talk that much about buy-side functions ever again, but just note that investment banks can sometimes serve that purpose. And we also lastly have advisory fees. Advisory and M&A, these two things go hand in hand, and I would like you guys to remember that. We're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions all of Chapter 4. It's going to be really interesting. And yeah, investment banks take a fee whenever they do advise on mergers and acquisitions. Does anyone remember what mergers and acquisitions is? Again, I don't need you guys to remember that now because we're going to cover it later. But it's simply when a company merges or acquires another, and it sounds simple in practice, but it can get so much more interesting. So William was supposed to present this. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. So I will be presenting this for you guys. This, of course, we make all of the graphics ourselves with the exception of a few. And again, if you're planning on becoming a graphic officer, take note of how some of these are looking so that you can kind of identify whether or not you think this would be within your skill set or something that you could acquire. So we're going to talk about the revenue sources of Goldman Sachs. Does anyone know what Goldman Sachs is? We talked about it in 1.2 when we identified the different types of banks that are here. We talked about regional banks. We talked about middle market, kind of, but I didn't really elaborate on that. We talked about boutique banks, and we talked about bulge bracket banks. Does anyone remember where Goldman Sachs may lie? This one's tricky. I mean, these might be the questions that will be on the quiz game we're going to play for a monetary prize during IBC Social 1. So I'll probably talk to you guys. I should talk to you guys about that during the end of class, and I'll do that. But yeah, we're going to be playing a monetary game during IBC Social 1 that covers all of Chapter 1. Luckily, you have YouTube videos at your disposal, and you have the slides at your disposal as well, so you can study up. But Goldman Sachs is a bulge bracket bank. In my opinion, it's like the Harvard of investment banks. It's the most prestigious one. It's obviously difficult to get into. It might even be more difficult to get into than Harvard. And these are its revenue sources. So institutional client services. Here the firm arranges and helps conduct transactions for clients etc., interested in buying and selling everything from bonds to foreign currencies. This process is called market making. We're going to talk a lot about market making in chapter 2, what it means. Just know that investment banks are big, investment banks are rich, and sometimes the market isn't doing so well with people like us investing in them, or because let's say some really rich person wants to dump a bunch of his stock into the market. That's going to cause fluctuation, right? We're assuming that he has a lot of stock to dump, and there may not be enough people like us to buy it. So investment banks will sometimes say, hey, you know what? I'm going to help you sell that trade to me slowly so that the market doesn't fluctuate like crazy. That's market making in a nutshell. We're going to talk about that a lot later. Another revenue source of Goldman Sachs is investing and lending. So essentially just giving out loans. And we talked a bit about bridge loans when we talked about the services of an investment bank in 1.1. But again, I know these may seem a bit disparate and away from investment banking, which we'll get to in a second, but just note that investment banks are financial behemoths. They're trying to make as much profit as possible. So they're going to do whatever they can within that financial realm if they do have, well, the capacities to support it. Now we have investment management. Through accounts, it manages wealth management services. Sorry, that's a bit redundant. Financial counseling, mutual funds. Goldman provides financial advice to a plethora of clients. That's more some of that buy-side function I talked about. And again, this is unique to investment banks. This is unique in between other investment banks. Other investment banks may not have these services, but just know that most investment banks, I'm pretty sure all of them will have investment banking services, which we're getting into. So Goldman guides companies embarking in mergers and acquisitions, provides assistance in bringing companies public, aka the initial public offering, the IPO, and then conducting financial restructurings, which we're going to talk about later. But that's really what comprises investment banking. You know, making those stocks exist, making other companies buy other companies, or allowing other companies to become bigger, better, stronger, and then restructuring other companies as well. That's why so many investment bankers later on become CEOs, because they understand the ins and outs of a company, how to structure it, and how to make it bigger, how to make it more successful. But yeah, again, I teach investment banking specifically because of the numerous exit opportunities you do have within finance that are equally as lucrative, if not exponentially more. So now we're going to get onto this necessities portion. And well, if you do any individual investing, this is probably going to be really useful to you. I'm never going to dive too deep into any of these reports. I'm not an accountant, but I will dive a bit deep into a prospectus. We're going to look at a sample one. And all that really covers is what that is whenever a company goes public, whenever a company starts releasing additional securities that it sells to the public, it has to craft a prospectus of some sort. So you're going to see that. And yeah, we're also going to break down the prospectus, I believe. Yeah, in chapter 3, we're going to break down the prospectus, and we're going to look at sample research reports as well. So that's for an individual stock. That's where you're going to find buy, sell, hold recommendations. And that's what a lot of your analysts at investment banks are going to be doing. Or at least, no, on buy-side institutions. Some sell-side institution investment banks will also have you do that. I guess it just depends, varies on what you want to work on. Okay, financial reports. Financial documents required by companies that aid investment bankers in their analysis. So we have a plethora of reports here. The 10K report, which is simply your annual report. This tells you how a company has performed over one fiscal year, which is an accounting year. Then you have your 10Q report. Well, how many quarters are there in a year? Obviously 4, so that means 3 months, right? As a year is 12 months. So every 3 months, you're going to have this 10Q report. And then you have your prospectus, which again is a document that a company must issue whenever it issues new securities for the public to buy. This can be for stocks, bonds, preferred shares, credit default swaps, although I'm pretty sure credit default swaps are long gone, but so on and so forth. Financial reports are important. What I want you to understand that's more important is financial statements, and how financial statements are within financial reports. And it's these financial statements that are ingredients, like the ingredients of candy, right? You have high fructose corn syrup, you have cocoa, so on and so forth. To make that candy, to make that decision on whether or not this company should merge or not. This is the meat of it. This is what investment bankers are analyzing and making financial models off of, these financial statements. They're found within financial reports, and they provide investment bankers with information that, well, allows them to analyze companies and do their general work. So 3 financial statements that may be of use to you are the balance sheet, which is a statement that shows the assets and the liabilities of a company, to put blatantly. An income statement, which is a statement that makes investors aware of the amount of money a company is actually brought in by selling their goods and services, and then also the profit that's left over. And then a statement of cash flows. This is the cash flowing in and out of a company. Again, we're never really going to reference this again. Maybe we'll reference it in chapter 5, but for the most part, this is probably the last time we're going to see all of this except for the prospectus. And then we have financial ratios. So there are a plethora of financial ratios. It would take years if I went through all of them, but a big one is that PE ratio. And what is a ratio if it's not already somewhat intuitive? They're calculated by extracting information from a company's financial statements. And again, it's these ratios that provide you with valuable insights into that company. So does anyone know what a PE ratio is or how exactly it works? I know some people in here know what a PE ratio is, but it's fine. It's your price to earnings ratio and or your earnings per share ratio. And you kind of want a PE, well, again, everything is relative, right? So if you're looking at PE ratios, you're likely looking at 2, 3, or 4. And if you manage to find one PE ratio that's really low, as an example, that's probably because the earnings per share portion in this denominator is really high. What that means is the company you're looking at is probably making a lot of money per share that it does have. It's a profitable company is all that means. But if the PE ratio of those that you're analyzing is really high, that just means that the company may not have a really high earnings per share, may not be super profitable, but the stock price is really high. So, do with that what you will.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Can you remind me what an investment banker is?
An investment banker? So an investment banker is probably someone that works with an investment bank, right? And let me actually talk a bit more about the structure of our curriculum if I haven't already. You're going to kind of learn about who an investment banker is as you go. But one thing that's important to note is that an investment bank itself has a range of services. It has a plethora of services because they're financial behemoths. They want to make as much profit as possible. Investment banking is one of those services. What mainly comprises investment banking is that initial public offering, that mergers and acquisitions advice, those financial restructurings. And then there are a few other things. We're going to talk about those later. But an investment banker, when I'm talking about it, is usually someone that works with those investment banking services within an investment bank. In Chapter 3, we're going to learn all about the IPO, the initial public offering. Chapter 4, mergers and acquisitions. And then Chapter 5, leverage buyouts. And this ties into private equity. Does anyone remember what private equity is? This is one of those exit opportunities I was talking about that was a lot more lucrative than investment banking, which is already lucrative. It's probably what I plan on trying to get into in the future. But again, it's very competitive. It's very tough. Private equity is buying a crappy car and selling it after you remodel that car, or buying a crappy house and selling it after you remodel that house, but obviously exploded onto a bigger scale. You're buying a company that you don't think is performing as well as it can be, and you restructure it with your private equity company to then sell it for a profit. And obviously, because companies are so expensive, you can only expect this company that you just restructured to sell for millions upon millions, if not billions of dollars. I.E. why private equity investors make so much money and why it's so lucrative. So Nicholas, if you could help me out with this slide, that would be great. Here you go.
All right, y'all. This is slide 2, necessities. So first off, you got debt. You got a couple different types of debt. You got fixed income instruments, bonds, or simply debt devices that allow investors to make return on their money via a coupon rate. So this is just like someone pays you back and you make a profit on interest or something. And then you got leverage, strategically using debt to obtain higher returns and fund various ventures. So basically this is like taking out a loan. Maybe you're a smaller investment bank and you need like this new software that costs a lot of money, right? You might take a loan or some to buy that software, and then hopefully you make a return on it and you make a lot more money. But it's also a double-edged sword, because if you accumulate too much debt, too much leverage, you kind of fall apart, and then everyone dies and your business fails. So you got the discounted cash flow analysis, an imperative tool that allows investment bankers to gauge the value of an asset based upon its future cash flows or the amount of money it will make in the future. So this is just like they're trying to predict the future. It might be an algorithm, some sort of algorithm to calculate if if an asset will be profitable for them, if it's worth their time to invest in it. And you got the generally accepted accounting principles. It's just like the standard way of doing things. It's like the rule book. There's investment banking is so big. There's too many investment banks. The market's huge. So these practices, like, it's kind of a standard way to everyone to do stuff. So it's apples to apples. It's fair for everyone.
Okay, thank you. So if I'm to elaborate a little bit further, so with debt and fixed income instruments, we're simply talking about debt securities, debt devices, like bonds. Bonds is a really good example here, and that's kind of what I placed. With leverage, like Nicholas talked about, it's a double-edged sword. Now, I may not use that that example of investing in software directly, but let's say an investment bank with its private equity division decides to take out a loan and invest in this software company that's not doing as much as it could, because it eventually wants to restructure it and then sell it for a profit, as companies, again, sell for a lot of money, right? They're taking out that loan, and that's kind of called leverage. You're strategically using debt so that you can buy that company. That's obviously a double-edged sword. If that company doesn't do well, if the ventures that you took out money for don't go to plan, you're going to lose a lot of money. You may even face bankruptcy as a company, as an investment bank, so on and so forth. Then we also have our discounted cash flow analysis. So I wouldn't use the word algorithm, but I would use the word financial model. So discounted cash flow analysis is probably one of the most important financial models used by investment bankers, and it'll essentially project the future cash flows of something in now's time. So if we want to look at it in the future, how much money is it going to be making? That's what a discounted cash flow analysis is going to allow you to do. And then GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, just like Nicholas said, will compare or are principles that your financial statements have to follow, so that if you're to look at a financial statement from X company and a financial statement from Y company, you can look at them and say, hey, this and this, well, I can at least tell that this is this because it's structured the same way. So that's why GAAP is important. It lets you have those apples to apples comparisons. This is, by the way, going to be on that. We're playing. Is anyone familiar with Gimkit? It's kind of like Kahoot, but a lot better. Like I don't really play that many video games, but it has like battle royale stuff. So it's pretty cool, I think. I don't know. But again, this is going to be one of your questions on okay, this is going to be one of your questions on that Gimkit. And again, you can win a monetary prize. I think last year we did, what, like $50 for the winner and then $15 for the person that came second place. I'm not sure if it's going to change this year. I guess you'll know if you win. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention that kind of just came to mind was something with the financial statements. Does anyone know where you can find these financial reports, which obviously contain some of these financial statements? Does anyone know what the SEC is? Pretty important. And if you're in APUSH, you're going to learn about it eventually. It might be in your alphabet soup. Yeah, you guys haven't learned about that yet. But the SEC is the Securities and Exchange Commission. This regulates everything that has to do with investing, essentially. And within the SEC's website, there's a database called EDGAR. This is, what does it stand for? Electronic Data Gathering and R. I forgot what the R means, but again, that's also going to be on your Gimkit. I have to remember a lot, so you guys have to give me a break sometimes. But this you will be able to find on Edgar. And in fact, I can pull it up right now. And if you ever do any individual investing, I want to look at the prospectus of a company that just issued some additional securities, or a company that just IPO'd like Birkenstock, well, you can find everything here. So let's go to the sec.gov website. We can go to filings, Edgar full text search. We can go to Apple. And then we can go to the different forms that it is that we want, like the 10K and the 10Q. So there we go, 10K. There are 23 so far. And you'll find some pretty recent ones, like 2023, so on and so forth. If you click on them, I'm pretty sure it's going to be very, very long. No, it's not that long. Wait. No, yeah, it's pretty long. It's pretty long. So that's where you can find that. So if you ever, for some reason, want to look through a bunch of financial reports, so be it. But again, that's it for today in terms of curriculum. I'm going to talk a little bit about IBC Social. And then at the end of IBC Social, I'm going to talk about Chapter 2 and what it is that you guys will be learning, and then what it's going to look like for you to be selected as an officer. So again, this is the link tree. If you haven't already scanned those forms for officer selection, you can find them here. But IBC Social is something that we have 5 times throughout our club year because we have 5 chapters. We do it at the end of every single chapter. And usually what we'll do is a game with monetary prizes. We're also going to have lots of food like pizza, soda, so on and so forth. So feel free to bring your friends. They don't have to know anything about investment banking. It's just, a fun group gathering activity. And then we're also going to have an investment banker speak with us. So sometimes they do come in person, but again, they're usually really busy. So they'll meet with us via Zoom likely. And we're going to develop a list of questions and pass out sheets that you can read the questions on so that, well, it's an interesting discussion, right? We want to make sure that we have knowledgeable discourse. And us officers are going to develop those questions. However, if you have any good questions, go onto the Google Classroom, click on attendance, and then in the question area, just put a question for IBC Social. Also, we're going to be talking about officer selection. So I already talked to you about officer selection. This IBC Social is where you're going to either present your graphic if you want to be a graphic officer, or you're going to give your speech and present your slide if you want to be a curriculum officer. So make sure you fill that form out really soon. Again, you don't have to upload your graphic or upload your speech yet. You can do that a few days before IBC Social will message you individually, but make sure you fill everything else out so we know who to message, who to coordinate with, so on and so forth. We might even add you to a group chat. We're going to figure that out. But yeah, hopefully you guys will be prepared. And again, for that game with the monetary prize, you're going to find all of the videos, except this one because it's just being recorded right now, on the YouTube/Google Classroom with the slides being there too. So you can study those, and good luck. Yeah, hopefully this was an informative meeting. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you guys during IBC Social, which is next Tuesday in this room. Thank you guys for coming.